Hello, welcome. If you're new here, you may not know that I ran a half marathon in September and before that a 10K in February, and that's actually what started my running journey. I have to be honest, I haven't run loads since the half marathon, but I am sort of documenting everything about my life really in my vlogs, but also my thoughts post-marathon, post-half marathon in a video which I'll link up here. I think this is the last separate running video that I'm going to make, and I have alluded to it already, but I'm going to break down the costs of everything I had in that year. It was exactly a year from I started running on the 8th of September and I did my half marathon on the 7th of September 1 year later. So I want to just look at that period of 365 days and have a look at what I spent on this hobby that I picked up because it was free. I already had running shoes. I did already have running tops, I think, or at least dance tops, but I did actually buy one the day I started running. I had leggings, I had a sports bra, which is quite important. And that was it really. I didn't feel I needed anything else. I actually even had a Fitbit, which I later learned I couldn't connect to my running app, so it didn't matter. I knew I would probably have to pay for the race, but aside from that, I was intending to go into this with no costs. So let's have a look how that actually worked out. And I've made some pie charts, which I'll show up here as I go through each one. We're going to look at a few different things. So first of all, I just wanted to have a look at the breakdown of where the money went. Was it shoes? Was it food? Was it races? Was it running clothes, tops, leggings, whatever else? And in this, I have tried to include things that I didn't purchase necessarily for running, but that I had purchased before and then used in my run. So my trainers, for example, or I had a running vest thing, or my sports bra, things like that I already had by the time I started running, but that I did have to pay for at some point. So, ta-da. So my biggest sector by far was clothes, which came to £170 and 4 pennies, which makes up about 40% of the pie. That is then followed by shoes, which is £131, making up about 30% of the pie. Then I've created a category for recovery. This was just the one time I went to the physio post 10K, and that was £60, and that is 14% of the pie. And then actually very close together, we've got race costs, which was £34.40 at 8%, and £32.74 for food, which was 7.6%. I will go into this all in a bit more detail in a moment, but things to note, as I said, some of these were already costs that I'd bared beforehand, and a lot of this, which we will look at in a pie chart, was not my cost, and a lot of these I will use longer term, not just in my running. I have no idea what the next pie chart's going to be, so let's have a look together. Oh, okay, this is a breakdown of the clothing. So we already know it was £170 approximately for clothes. How does that break down within different sort of parts of my body that needed to be clothed? So unsurprisingly to me, the biggest slice of the pie is the sports bras, which were a total of £81.50. That was across 2 bras. Bras are expensive, and that makes up almost 50%, 48% of the pie. Then that's followed by another huge chunk for my running leggings, which came to £58.43, and that's I think for 3 pairs of leggings, and that was 34% approximately, 34.5%. And actually 2 of the 3 leggings were quite cheap, and then the 3rd pair my mum bought without my permission, and ended up being the most expensive, but also the most worn and the best sort of type of legging for me. And I ended up running my half marathon in them, so can't complain. Then we've got running tops at about 13.5%, only £23.12, not very much, I would say. And in fact, I actually have loads of running tops now because I got one from Cancer Research UK, who I fundraised for the first time, and then another one from the Children's Heart Federation, who I fundraised for the second time, plus then the tops I already had and bought, and it's just, I've got a lot. More than I need, probably, at this point. And then I've put a category for outer layers, which is this running vest I did already have because of dancing, but it was £6.99, and that comes in at around 4%. Also worth noting, because some of these items, sorry about my computer, because some of these items were purchased years before I started running, around 2020, 2019 even, I think that running top was, as in the running vest. Things might have been cheaper then, because the cost of living has shot up in the last few years. And also, obviously, if you look at, what's it called? Cost per wear, those items will be much better. Again, I'm not sure what the next pie chart's gonna be, but let's have a look. Okay, this is interesting. This is things that I bought before versus after, and that is basically saying I bought this specifically with the intention and thought of running, or this is something I already had. So things bought before September 2024 came to almost £121, which was about 30% of the pie, making the rest, £307.19, 71.1%. That is actually more spent after than I thought. I thought it was going to be more sort of equally weighted. I think I probably expected about 60-40, so we're not that far off, but it is interesting. But I did buy lots of running clothes and some food. Obviously all my food was bought after September 2024, and the races, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. Let's have a look at the next one. Ooh, okay. So items that I spent money on that I will use outside of running comes to £325.18, almost, well, over 75% of the pie. And I feel like this, I probably could have split further, but I haven't, into things I needed to buy anyway, such as the trainers when I first bought them years ago, and things I only bought for the sake of running, but that I will use again, such as my second pair of trainers or some of the leggings or whatever else. And then will not use outside of running. It still came to £103, and that's 24% of the pie. And this is things like race day, the physio, obviously any food that I ate and don't have left. I think that's about it. I can't think what else would fall into this category. All right, next pie chart. Okay, this is the one that I knew would be interesting. The things I paid for versus the things other people paid for. And when I say other people, I would say 99% my parents. So my cost was about 30%, £130, and then other people's costs was almost £300, which comes in almost at 70%. Off the top of my head, I know the biggest cost that was my own was the physio, because that was £60, that's already almost half. Obviously, almost all of the food. My parents did pay for the Sour Patch Kids and Wayne paid for the Percy Pigs, but all the rest of the food was mine. The running vest was mine. I can't think what else. Oh, the races, that was mine as well. And I had a heavily reduced cost for both the races because I went for a charity place rather than the open general places. Do I have any more pie charts? I'm not sure. I do not. I have, however, made a little list for myself of the things I bought and where I bought them. So I'm happy to share that with you right now, so that if you're interested in running and need items, I can tell you where to get them. So the running vest that I keep referring to is actually like a zip up top that you can wear as an overlayer when it's a bit colder, which was great when I was training for the winter run and was not used once when I was training for the half marathon over summer. And that one I got from TK Maxx. I'm not sure, I presume it won't still be there because that one was from 2020. So I had to go back and find receipts for these dates, but thankfully a lot of it's online. But I would recommend TK Maxx for items like that, because they did have a few different options, some slightly more expensive. I think this one was in like the sale rack and I was just very lucky. Also, I mean, it's been 5.5 years, quality is still as good. Wear it, not loads, but when I go dancing or whatever, I wear it as well. So very happy with that. Next, I'll actually talk about both my sports bras, even though I purchased them at, 3-year intervals. They're both from Bravissimo, and they were each about £40. I can't say I was thrilled with either. When I started running, the one that I had seemed to be rubbing quite a lot, and so I bought a non-wired one, and I don't know if the fit's wrong or what the problem is, but it's just not perfect either. It does the job, I'm fine, but I wasn't thrilled. Next, my 2 pairs of trainers, again bought 4 years apart. The white ones that you would have seen a lot are crazy expensive. Actually, now that I'm looking at this, I'm blown away by the fact that I spent this money on shoes. Probably my parents paid for it, but they were £72 and from a shop called Schuh, SCHUH, but they are Nike. So I'm not quite sure what the story is there. And then the other pair were about £60 from Asics. Then, in terms of running tops, I actually spoke to you when I bought the first one. That was £3.50 from a charity shop. I was thrilled. I still wear it, when I go running. I'm very happy with it. But then I also spoke to you when I bought the rest of the running tops and the running leggings, all of which were from Rockwear in Australia. And with the conversion rate, I got great prices on everything. So yeah, that was wonderful. but maybe a bit hard to get if you're over here. My biggest recommendation though, if you're looking for leggings, and this is exactly what worked for me, know the cut that you like. So I knew that I liked, you know, slightly high-waisted and then sort of ankle length as opposed to full length. At Rockwear they call it 7/8 length. And then pockets. Pockets are key. I don't have a running bag. I didn't have like or a vest or anything. But the last pair of leggings that I got, which were also the most expensive, had 4 proper pockets plus 1 small one at the back. So I could carry snacks, a small bottle of water, phone, keys, tissues, like I was well stocked. So I definitely would recommend that. And then the main items that I wrote down under the food category, obviously races and stuff, you know, and the physio, but the 4 places that I've written down are Dirk van den Broek, which is a Dutch supermarket, and it's just where I got like my sugar sweet things, of which I still have loads left. So I'll definitely be using those for other things, or for runs maybe. Next I wrote down Tortilla, which is where I went after the 10k for lunch, and I paid for it. So I included it as a cost because I wouldn't have spent money on it otherwise. Then the Sour Patch Kids, which came from Australia, so just the supermarket there. And then the food that I bought specifically for my carb loading sort of 48 hours before, that was all from Sainsbury's. So I think in total, I actually didn't write down the total, which is very silly of me, but we can work it out very quickly. It was obviously over 400, but let's just get the full amount up. £428.18. That is what I spent on something that should have been a free hobby. That is ridiculous to me. And admittedly, in hindsight, I maybe didn't need to spend as much money, especially on, as I said, the running tops, because I did end up getting a couple free. Some items, as you saw, I already had, so I didn't have to actually spend money for the sake of running. And some items were just a necessity. You know, I had to pay the race fees. I had to go to the physio to make sure that I could keep running for the half marathon and not do any long-term damage. There was a real chance that I was going to have to go again because of the ITBS, but actually it's been okay. My camera's about to die. So I'm going to finish this up here. If you have any questions, feel free to link them below or comment them below. And I'll see you in another video very soon. Bye!